Hello friend, I want to tell you about the Honda Civic car. The 7th generation Honda Civic was not the cherry on the cake of the Japanese compact classic. It looked more like a fly had landed on the cake. Despite the initial reluctance to use it, the car eventually became desirable and is particularly interesting today, especially with the Japanese diesel engine. The Honda Civic is an interesting compact in terms of design, because for years it has used independent suspension on both axles. But in the front of the 7th generation, unlike its predecessor, a classic McPherson strut with a lower wishbone and a steering knuckle was used. At the rear, for a car with a rather conservative character, the suspension is simply sensational. It's a traditional Honda multi-link. Drum brakes were used on the rear axle of many cars, and the steering gear is electrically assisted, petrol versions only. Engines. Honda's problem on the European market was the lack of a decent diesel engine. Previously, Rover engines were used, but they did not gain recognition among customers. In the 7th generation, they decided to use a Japanese engine, but from Isuzu. At that time, Honda was just working on its compression ignition unit. The basic source of power was the previously known 1.4L engine with 90 horsepower and 1.6 VTECE with 110 horsepower, also available for sport versions. The most powerful engine was a 2-liter engine from the K20 family with 160 horsepower, Type S, and 200 horsepower, intended only for Type R. The only diesel was the Isuzu 1.7 CTDI with 100 horsepower and 220 Nm of torque at 1,800 revolutions per minute. And it is this engine that we will deal with. What's broken? Let's start with the body and interior. The problem with the Honda Civic VII is what is visible at first glance, i.e. the body and paint. The thin layer of paint, in some cases even below 100 microns, is also delicate and not very resistant to stone impacts. Therefore, the numerous visible chips in the front of the car should not come as a surprise. The chip quickly exposes the bare sheet metal and corrosion occurs in these places. Corrosion also appears on the tailgate and at the front seat mounts. The interior is made perfectly, and although the materials do not seem particularly pleasant, they reward you with a long-lasting, fresh look. There is an occasional problem with controlling the ventilation system, but the air conditioning is very durable and, interestingly, despite the completely different interior, its panel is interchangeable with the sedan version. It is also worth noting that only manual air conditioning was offered in the Honda Civic. All electrics, as is typical in Honda, do not cause problems. It is difficult to find a model in which any element of equipment does not work properly. Those who are afraid of the complicated construction of the suspension system with a multi-link design do not have to worry about it if they buy a Honda Civic. The solution that the Japanese have used is durable, and only the rubbers and the upper wishbone wear out, which are easy to get in spare parts stores. There is practically no need to use ASO at all. The only thing to pay attention to is the rear axle geometry, which must be adjusted periodically along with the front. The front uses a simple triangular wishbone with a pin attached to the steering knuckle. Replacing the pin is of course not a problem, but it takes some time and the labor can be more expensive than with arms with a pin. Due to the design of the rear axle, replacing shock absorbers will also take the mechanic more time than in beam systems. Different shock absorbers are used in the front for the right and left side, which is worth remembering when ordering them. The problem with the Honda Civic VII's running gear is the steering gear, which wears out quite quickly and picks up play. If it's not much, it's worth taking care of it right away and eliminating it. If it's more serious, you need to replace the gear. In petrol versions, you can replace the electric power steering motor and the gears separately. In diesels, the power steering is hydraulic. Another problem, partly related to the chassis, is vibration during braking. If the brake discs are new and of decent quality, the cause should be sought in the suspension, but the most common culprit is a worn steering gear that generates vibrations during braking. There is a common opinion, not only among users but also among mechanics, that the Isuzu-designed 1.7-liter diesel engine, also used in Opels, is a failed design. But what is the truth? At the beginning it should be mentioned that the engine that appeared in 2002 in Hondas already has common rail injection and does not have much in common with the older generations, which had problems with the injection system. It is in fact a simple and successful engine with a single camshaft driven by a belt, which is worth replacing before the mileage of 100,000 kilometers. The valves have plate regulation, and if you take care of all service activities along with regular oil changes to synthetic 5W30, it is difficult to talk about any typical ailments. The engine does not work with a particulate filter and a dual-mass flywheel. It is therefore not only a durable but also cheap engine to operate. Problems with gearbox failures that are often mentioned in the Honda Civic VII topic concern only the petrol versions. The maintenance costs of the Honda Civic with diesel should be considered low. The engine consumes no more than 6.5 liters of diesel fuel per 100 kilometers and is relatively durable. The highest service costs are related to the suspension and brake system, for which it is best to choose top-shelf spare parts. High reliability plays to the user's advantage, but it often happens that as a result, users neglect typical service activities. It is not difficult to find a Honda specialist workshop in Europe, although generally speaking it is in the largest cities in the country. Honda specialists offer complete servicing at an often higher level than an ASO, for much less money. The Honda Civic VII is no longer a model that is as popular with car thieves as the younger generations. The question of whether buying a Honda Civic makes sense is a bit awkward, because there is no generation that would not be worth recommending. However, the question of whether buying a Honda with a diesel engine makes sense remains. Of course, you have to approach it pragmatically. If you are looking for a cheap car with a 5-door body, spacious interior and such an engine, the Honda Civic 1.7 CTDI is a good choice. However, if you are a young person who values the performance and atmosphere of the Civic, then buying a version with a 1.6 or 2.0L engine will be a better option. The operating costs of such cars can be easily reduced by installing a good quality gas installation. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I haven't mentioned, be sure to write about them in the comments.
I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what brakes and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro.